Global, sparking innovative thoughts. สวัสดีค่ะ Welcome to another episode of Techsauce Global Podcast. I'm Chawarat Yongjiranон Arpupe, the Techsauce Global Content Editor. Today, we're going to take a look at innovation, how it plays a big role in organizations. We've already known that it is a very vital role indeed in getting things moving in your business. But now we're going to learn from a giant in the tech industry on how they are, taking advantage, leveraging on innovation. We're actually going to talk to the Chief Innovation Evangelist at Google, Dr. Frederik G. Pferdt. Swadika, hello.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, for your background, you have a doctorate in business and human resources education. You've been spending a lot of time talking about sharing good news. That's what I've read about you so far. But for our viewers and listeners, can you tell us what does a Chief Innovation Evangelist exactly do?
Yes, that's a great question. So as Google's Chief Innovation Evangelist, I really spread the good news that everyone is creative, right? And I help really to grow an innovation mindset with our employees globally. And I also, I'm passionate about helping to develop our Google innovation culture and just evolve that culture moving forward.
So do you work with all of the teams or how does it work?
Absolutely, yes. Working across teams, across the globe, in different regions. And now it's possible, actually, that we can do that through our technology. So I'm here in my geodesic dome in the Santa Cruz Mountains, a dome that I built with my friends pre the pandemic, actually.
Wow.
And it allows me every morning kind of like to come up here and connect with my colleagues and peers from across the world to really help to build that innovation mindset with them and train them in skills like empathy, expansive thinking, but also experimentation, and help them to really develop that confidence to move their ideas forward.
I don't believe it. I thought it was actually a screensaver or like a design behind you. You're actually in like a dome structure.
Absolutely, that's very kind. Yes, it's actually real. We can go back here. It's a geodesic dome structure that actually served as a friend's space, so a friend's dome pre the pandemic. But unfortunately, we didn't have friends over so far because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
But now it serves perfectly as a work from home environment for me, but also it serves for my 3 kids as a school, right? Because they're in online school since March last year. And so it has been a great environment for us to just be close to nature, but also close to other people through technology.
Okay, definitely. I kind of sidetracked there, but I think a lot of our viewers probably are curious. A little bit more detail about your work at Google. You say that you've talked or you work with different teams all times. How do you approach innovation at Google when working with different departments? I mean, obviously, innovation has always been in the forefront of the company. What is your role in pushing that forward?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So my focus is really on the people, right? So I'm part of an organization called People Development. So we really focus on helping our employees grow and learn. And so my specific focus is on creativity and innovation and really working across teams, specifically with our leaders as well, to help them to just grow that innovation mindset. And so I'm doing that through programs I developed, for example, a program that we scaled globally and now a third of the company has been trained in. It's called CSI Lab, Creative Skills for Innovation, that we offer now as a digital version as well. And, through conversations and one-on-one coachings and other, interventions, I'm working with, leaders and teams across the organization to really focus on how can we, develop that mindset of an innovator. And that has been my passion since, 11 years at Google, and really driving that forward. And focusing on how can we establish an innovation culture, a culture that evolves, that has values, that really focuses on producing, those great innovations.
I went to Google actually on one trip before COVID, and it was like really good. I love the food there. I love the campus. It was wonderful to see everybody interacting with each other. And Google is the pioneer of actually constructing a workspace where people are, encouraged, are supported, are enabled to meet each other and talk about innovation and creativity. But now with COVID-19 and social distancing in play, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear that you loved our environment and the offices, but also the food, right? I think that's, an important part of our lives,
Yeah.
of everyone's lives, right, is food. But I think you mentioned an interesting point, and that is that, the office space in like a creative environment is one thing, but actually building a culture is another thing, right? And so we at Google, we have 3 values that describe really how we want to work together. And that is respect the user, respect the opportunity, and respect each other. And those 3 values really help us to define how we want to work together. What is our aspiration as an organization? And I think that's very important for every organization to really have a clear mission. For us, it's organizing the world's information to make it universally accessible and useful, plus having values that define really how you want to work together. And so I think that is, besides having a creative space and an environment, also very important for organizations to develop that culture of innovation.
So how do coworkers and teams, get together nowadays? They can't get together over a coffee or a picnic on, the campus. Is it just like everybody else, like just through Zoom? Which a lot of other businesses or organizations have said that they struggle with that as well. Trying to meet together in a kind of a casual but very creative way, where it's not just about achieving a certain agenda for the day.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when we March last year announced as one of the first companies that we want to work from home, I think for me it was an interesting reframing that I practiced myself. Instead of saying I have to work from home, I can. So that little reframe allowed me to actually look at that as an opportunity, right? Opportunities like now we can stay connected with our family members, if we have care opportunities and take care of family members, but also like creating our own environments at home, right? How we want to work. And so investing in that was one of the first things we actually did as an organization, and allowing every employee with a budget that they received kind of like to create their own environments at home that really felt natural to them, that they really enjoy and kind of like, like to set up so that they can work effectively with each other. And at Google, we are quite used to kind of like working in a digital way, right? We're used to kind of like using, Google Meet or kind of like other video conferencing technologies, but also, email and chat and so forth to really stay connected, connected as employees and connected as human beings. But what's most important, I think, is also to focus on what are some of the rituals we want to introduce now in this digital first world? What are some of the rituals we want to introduce to really put that human connection front and center? So thinking about like, how can you start your meeting in a different way? How can you introduce that level of trust that we, built up when we were like, physically together, now virtually? And that is something that is a creative exercise. And we, in our team meetings, we start our meetings with a mindfulness exercise for the first 5 minutes where we, just breathe together, or like, we have other mindfulness exercises that we go through that really helps us to get connected, with ourselves, and also get connected with each other that is on the screen. And so just introducing those rituals on a very, very practical level, I think helps to make that work from home situation actually work. And also kind of like reframing, as I mentioned, instead of saying I have to work from home, saying I can work from home. And so that little reframe, I think, opens up a lot of opportunities.
I think that's wonderful. I'm going to ask for our Techsauce team now to like breathe together. I'm going to tell the CEO, Kunmimi, hey, we need to start breathing before we have a Zoom meeting. Now, your job has been about bringing good news. 2020 hasn't exactly been a memorable, like a positive year for many of us. What is then the good news from 2020, and what good news can we see for the year coming here with 2021?
Yes, I have to add a little piece. That is, I'm spreading the good news that everyone is creative, right? So it's just not purely good news, but like it's the good news that everyone is creative. So I have that deep belief
Yes.
that I want to share with many people around the world. And so I think what we see is that it has been an extraordinary year, right, for everyone, to say the least. And everybody experienced change in some form or some way. And some of us experienced loss as well, right? What I also see is that we have that notion of that a lot of trends have been accelerated, especially how we live, work, learn, and play. So just think for a moment where you are. I see most of you are, working from home or joining from, somewhere else than the office. And what are you doing, right? We're having a conversation, we're talking about, interesting topics like innovation and creativity and so forth. But you also shop differently, probably, right? Where you get your food from, where you get your groceries from, and so forth, where you get your clothes from. You spend your weekends in different ways, or you think at least differently about vacation. So what we see is that it really helped us to reimagine our everyday lives. And reimagining, I think, is a very important task that we need to do even more often as human beings, or even as humankind, because that allows us to really paint a picture of the future that we want to see happening. But not everyone can, because sometimes our mindsets get in the way. So how can we develop that mindset that helps us to reimagine, that helps us to show a little bit more empathy, probably, for other people, but also helps us to experiment and try things? And so what we also see is that trend of experimentation is existing, that most of us are experimenting in how we connect with other people, how we do online schooling, how we prepare our food, how we spend our time in team meetings, so forth. So experimentation is, I think, another trend that we see is really happening because of the pandemic.
I think that's a great explanation as to what we're experiencing now. And I like the idea that you said that it's all about our imagination. And there is a use for imagination. I think a lot of people overlook that. Talking about behavior, though, we're not going to go back to what we were like before COVID-19. Definitely, our behaviors have changed. What is the main behavior change, do you think, that everyone is going to have after, we go through this whole journey of COVID-19?
I think one of the interesting things that I'm observing is that, most things moved to digital, right? Again, how we work, how we shop, how we learn. And maybe some things got a little more human as well, right? Now we can see each other in our, natural environments where we are at home, for example, which creates that human connection a little bit more. But for me as a father and a passionate educator, I think what's most exciting is that we now have a chance to reimagine education. And we see that my 3 kids, they moved in March to online school overnight. And so that was a challenge at first. But again, like we reframed it from like the schools are closed now towards how can we now learn from anywhere and really use that as an opportunity to teach our kids in a very different way, including, my parents, so the kids' grandparents, that are joining from Germany from time to time to, teach some lessons to my kids as well. They're doing online school. They're using YouTube. They're using Google Classroom and other technologies to really learn. And I think it's a success model that we're seeing as well, because my middle one, he's 5 years. He learned how to write and how to read purely online, right, with digital technologies. But there's a downside towards this as well. So when I talk to my oldest one, he's missing obviously his friends, right? Playing with friends and like, on the school playgrounds and so forth. So I think that's something that we need to kind of like, figure out is how can we build that human element as well into our education system and put the human or the student front and center and their needs. So when you talk about behaviors, I think one of the behaviors is that, not everything has to be like happening in an office space, for example, if we consider work, right? Work can actually happen, from anywhere, right? And we see that actually is quite a success story as well, that we now can actually, have a dialogue and exchange, thoughts and ideas virtually, for me in the middle of the evening. And I think that's working. And I think that's some of the behaviors we see that we're going to keep, hopefully. But we're still in a learning process overall. And so we as humanity still are learning and growing, like what's working, what's not working, what we keep and what will we change moving forward.
Definitely, everyone can relate to what you just said about, going online overnight. It, in a way, in a positive way, COVID-19, and we've talked about this over the past months and the year, that, it in a lighter sense, in a positive sense, it has really disrupted us. It has brought about different types of innovation, whether it is in e-commerce or in education. When we talk about education, what other types of innovation do you see that has been accelerated so far from the virus?
Yes, that's a great question. And for me, my work is mostly focused on the innovator. So the person, that actually comes up with those, radically new ideas and what mindset and what skill sets they actually need to exhibit. And so my focus is less on the innovation, but more on the innovator. And so I would say for me, the most important mindsets that actually I think were kind of like coming to the forefront is around empathy, right? Empathy, that more and more people now really try to put themselves into other people's shoes. Try to understand, if you're a leader, try to understand your employees in a better way to offer them better services around working from home. If you're like a CEO of an organization, trying to understand your clients and your employees in a better way, to really understand what has shifted in terms of their needs. Or if you're a teacher, understanding your students in a very different way, in a better way, showing empathy for their needs, to really serve them in a better way. I think that's one of the mindsets that really came forward, but also experimentation, right? Really trying things on a small scale or a big scale. And so one of the most interesting things I think that happened at Google was when the pandemic started, we came together as an organization, and we really came together to put out that challenge around like, how can we actually look at our services and our products and our initiatives and really provide something helpful quickly to the people around the world? So we coined that challenge, Products for Good. And over 48 hours, 2,500 ideas were submitted by employees from around the world. And, things like Teach from Anywhere as an initiative that we launched partnering with UNESCO were introduced, but other things as well. Features on Google Maps that actually now show where you can get food to go, or curbside pickup and so forth. And other interesting initiatives and products were launched immediately. So I think when, a crisis happened or a pandemic happens, I think organizations really probably show how agile they are, how kind of like change ready they are. And I think for us at Google, it was very important that we came together and really showed the best what we have and provided that to our people in the world.
I think the key word that I've gotten from you and your talks is empathy and understanding the consumer, which is, the 101 in doing business. But the challenges are there always. Would you say, how would you say that has changed in understanding what the consumer wants? What is their emotion? Is it easier or harder when you compare it before and after COVID hit?
It's a great question. I think what has changed is all of our needs, right? And people realize that now, right? That probably pre-COVID, we didn't really deeply understand, other people's needs, right? We probably had an assumption of what they need. But when something radically changes, right, as we saw with the pandemic, when you have to, for example, move education online, right, you really sense like, oh, there is something different now. And I need to practice more empathy to really understand like what students right now need to really continue learning and growing. And I think that has been exciting to see that now the successful companies and organizations and startups and even governments that really now understand how the needs have shifted are the most successful ones as well, right? So that organization or those organizations that actually showed that empathy really now are the successful ones because they now can adapt to kind of like those changed needs as well.
Yeah, and when you talk about innovation and change, a lot of companies, most companies have had to pivot, from the traditional structure, which we've always been talked about, how we need to go digital, and they pivoted very fast into trying to go online, doing business in a new way. When we take a look at Google, on the other hand, you are already in that platform. You have so many branches growing in different sectors. Did COVID-19 change the focus of Google in any way? I mean, has there been a specific prioritization of a certain sector or business after the virus hit?
Great question. I think we are still like laser focused on our mission to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. And I think times like these, it's more important than ever, right? Having that mission. And I think, providing the right information to people, giving access to information is something that is critical, right? Especially in times like these. And, exciting things also kind of like happened just, last week when we, opened our offices to really accelerate the distribution of the vaccine around the world. And I think that's, just contributions we can make as an organization to really be helpful. And so staying laser focused on our mission, I think, is now more important than ever. But also I see as a parent of or a father of three, I think education and how we actually invest now in education, really with, Google Classroom and like Chromebooks and other things as well, and Google Meet, is for me exciting because now we can actually think about providing education to everyone, right? And really reimagine what education actually can do, or what we should do in the education system. And it's, I think, long overdue.
Definitely. I also teach as well, and I use Google Classroom. It's been very, very handy indeed to a lot of teachers. When we take a look at the corporate side, though, in doing business and surviving, COVID-19 and beyond it, what do you think companies or leaders of companies need to focus on? What should their eye be on in terms of, innovative ideas and technological innovations?
So I cannot speak for other organizations, obviously.
What would your advice be for, leaders who are listening to us right now, who are, operating their businesses at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the pandemic really has surfaced a lot of problems around the world, right? That we didn't pay a lot of attention towards, right? And I think just recognize those problems and then picking your problem and trying to reframe that, right? Looking at the problem as an opportunity and then taking on that opportunity and start experimenting. I think that's what I would recommend more people do, more organizations should do. And really start around reimagining what can be different and what should be different so that we can actually see a different future happening as well.
A lot of companies, yes, keep going, sorry.
One last point I think is important. It's just listening to your employees as well, right? Truly listening to, what's going on in people's lives to really understand, what are some of the problems that are surfaced surfacing now around mental health, around people feeling lonely, people feeling overwhelmed if they have, caretaker responsibilities and so forth. So really truly listening to your employees as well, showing that empathy so that you can provide, maybe flexible models or kind of like other models too, like we did at Google, where we helped, our employees to have, a couple of days off, right, when they needed to take that time. Also providing with carers leave, employees that had to take care of family members, extended leave. And all of those things really kind of like being critical at these times to really help to have a healthy culture and a healthy organization.
I just wanted to go into more detail about it because a lot of our listeners are startups and business owners. A lot of people that I've talked to, they've said, like the plans for 2020, they just threw it out of the window and they had to start anew. For a lot of operators or entrepreneurs, I mean, some have been very successful. They have moved forward. They have really been focused on being positive. On the other hand, there are those people who are stressed, who have to think about the needs of their employees, the needs of their company on how to survive at this stressful time, because it is like a marathon, a never-ending, well, it will end soon, but it seems like a never-ending marathon for a lot of business owners and startups. How do you keep that positivity or good news or, the innovative side of the company going, and how do you encourage your teams at a time where it's very stressful for everyone?
That's a great question. I absolutely understand that, there's people who really struggle, right? And there's organizations who really struggle. I think we're living in times of increased change, right? And ambiguity, right? So I think we should continue to do is like just looking at the problems that are existing, right? And there are problems related to, the environment, for example, our climate change. There's problems related to social injustice. There's problems related to education, right? And not everyone having access to education as well. So I think looking at those problems and trying to find ways of reframing those problems as opportunities.
Very good.
And then
yes.
trying to, when you reframe those problems, seeing what is the opportunity here that we have, and then trying to see like, how can I use that as an opportunity? For example, when the wildfires hit our home, right? They were a mile away from our house. We needed to evacuate as a family of 5 immediately. And so we took 10 things that are important to us and went on a road trip. But we reframed that problem of like the wildfires could potentially destroy all of our belongings in our house into an opportunity, saying like, now we go on a road trip and really trying to connect as a family and feeling connected. But it also was a crash course on empathy, now feeling actually and understanding like how a refugee must actually feel when they need to leave their house, their country, and so forth. So we went on this road trip, not knowing if we ever will return. Luckily we could return, but really then trying to see what can we do around climate change as a family, and taking that problem more seriously so that we invest now in our greenhouse dome that we just built and growing our own food moving forward. And, we don't have the skill set yet, but we're learning on the way, like how you can actually grow your own food. But if that problem would never have happened, right, we wouldn't actually see that as an opportunity now to really focus our attention as a family to climate change and what we can do to create a more sustainable living and environment for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Would you like to give any last remarks to our listeners on what to think about as we get into the second month or the third month of 2021?
Yes, I think, for me, the need for innovation has never been more relevant than before, right? So I just encourage everyone to see that as an opportunity, that now some problems are surfacing, some trends are accelerating, and taking that as an opportunity to really do something different so that hopefully we're going to see a different future, a better future happening for all of us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederik.
Thank you.
You so much.
Techsauce, sparking innovative thoughts.